All right. Well, thank you for joining the Fellowship.Art Emergency Response Program kickoff webinar. On the call with me are Troy Vosseller, my co-founder at Generator, and Maureen Regali, who runs the Fellowship.Art program. So today our goal is to help everyone orient into the program for what it is, to give a preview of what's to come in the program itself, and also to give an introductory overview of what we think are a number of critical programs that we hope the artists take advantage of in order to take the best measure of relief from the current set of federal and state-based legislation in response to the COVID crisis. So thank you all for coming. What we have in the program is a step-by-step process to help you determine your eligibility and also to hopefully apply for the different financial support opportunities from various organizations, including the federal government to potentially even state unemployment. We'll have someone presenting from Imagine MKE, which has a relief program for artists to receive support. But all of this is dedicated to pragmatic and practical steps that you could take in order to get support, in addition to programming around challenges such as the mental health and wellness of everyone, as we're all dealing individually with one of the most stressful events of our lifetimes. This program is possible because of American Family Insurance. The company has an Institute for Corporate and Social Impact that's our lead sponsor on the Fellowship.Art program, and has enabled this emergency response effort. So we hope it's valuable. And again, our only goal here is to help each artist individually get the best and most access to relief efforts. If you're interested, you could call for audio. We have this and the webinar ID, but point being, we're trying to make this available both digitally and by just traditional telephone. So we want to share this up front in case anybody wants to share it with anyone who couldn't make this webinar, or just generally as you're looking for information on how to engage the program. If you have a question, just type it in and send it to the host. We'll make our best after we get the webinar wrapped up to answer any outstanding questions and post them. We'll also be posting the webinar on our website, as we have all of our other programs. So if you're interested and you go to the Emergency Response Program link on our website, there's a resources page, and it has all of our past webinars, including anything from how to apply for the disaster loans to mental health and wellness to general resources. So please do check that out. This program itself will be included on that resource page shortly, and we'll do our best to follow up with any Q&A. And again, we'll be scheduling one-on-ones through the program to help, so it's not your only opportunity to ask a question. Also, feel free to send Maureen at generator.com any questions you have during the webinar as well. And also that'll enable us, if there's any follow-up after the webinar, to help individually. So taster's choice on how to engage, but our big message is that we're here to try to help you in each of the contextual ways that you're dealing with the challenge. If we have any technology issues, this is kind of the best we can do, but we're recording the webinar, and again, you'll be able to find it after. So if your phone drops or we have some issue, not much we can do during the show itself, but you will be able to access it after, and again, just send any follow-up to Maureen. So hopefully that's some initial context. And then Troy and me. So Troy is a co-founder along with myself of Generator. We started the company 8 years ago, and our mission is we want to be the best partner for a community to invest into itself. And we believe communities do that best when they are the most passionate about investing into their best and brightest. So that's our company by mission. We started working with startups. We went to small businesses and social enterprise. And then about 2.5 years ago, almost 3, we started working with artists and musicians. So in addition to Fellowship.Art, we run the Backline program for musicians in Milwaukee, as well as Motown in Detroit, and soon to be Backline Cleveland. So this is a program that we've run, across multiple states, and culminates our knowledge of working with artists in that time to try to help you in the crisis. So what is this program? The program is really 2 separate tracks, one of which, if you're on right now, is our webinar track. We'll be doing different programs, anything around the CARES Act to mental health and wellness. Imagine MKE will be presenting. And as I mentioned, all these will be recorded and kept on our generator.com website for later access. More importantly, we're also offering one-on-one concierge service. So if you're interested in talking to one of our team members, the goal is to take all this information. We know it's incredibly overwhelming and dense, and that can make it both inaccessible and daunting. please, if you're curious, you just want help on anything, just sign up for a virtual or telephone session with one of our team members. And our job is just to try to help you wherever you're at. So we have people who sign up and they're borderline experts in all of this, people who come in and they're sort of, help me understand, all these acronyms are too overwhelming. What do I do and what's my next step? So anywhere in that spectrum, we're prepared to help, and please feel free to sign up. It is the core value of this emergency response program. So this isn't one where we're encouraging you to do it. We're requesting that you sign up for this help if you think it might be valuable. Everything about what we're doing, including those one-on-one calls, is free. We've been working really hard to educate ourselves on these different programs and what's going on. If we can't answer it, we do have volunteers from the law school who've agreed to help us answer questions so that we can get source material if needed. We're happy to help in English and Spanish. The broad message is come as you are, and as much as we can help you in your context get the best set of resources, that's our only goal. So thank you to American Family for making that statement possible, and we hope that this sets the tone for go to our website, send Maureen a note. We really, really, really want you to sign up for one of these one-on-one sessions. We've done hundreds of these in the past few weeks, and they've made such a difference. So everyone who does it, it'll delight us if and when you do. We want to be clear on some of the messaging we have. So for everyone who's interested, and here's a link to it, there's an opportunity to apply for an SBA Disaster Loan. It's referred to as the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and by its acronym EIDL. So you'll hear one of those three being used to refer to the specific program. It's a program made available by the Small Business Administration in response to the state becoming a disaster area for purposes of the SBA Disaster Loan Program. That's a lot of mumbo jumbo about. Basically, you can apply for two elements in this program. The first is under the CARES Act, the government created a $10,000 forgivable loan known as an emergency grant under the SBA Disaster Loan of up to $10,000 per applicant. And this program is available to sole proprietors. So if you have been impacted by the COVID crisis in the course of your professional work, you can apply for this disaster loan, and it will make you eligible for an emergency grant known as a forgivable loan. And that's complicated, and we could talk about it. That is up to $10,000. We anticipate it'll be at a minimum $1,000 grant per award. So if you're interested, we encourage you to apply for that. It also, when you apply, makes you eligible for the actual loan itself. That loan we could talk more about. There's no prepayment penalty. If you're declined for the loan, you still get the forgivable loan / grant. So we encourage everyone to look at this program to apply as soon as possible. We also have a step-by-step guide to applying. So Troy, my co-founder, created snapshots of each of the application stages and a virtual walkthrough. So if you're interested, please feel free to apply. Oops, how do I go back? Oh shoot, how do I go back, Troy?
Try the arrow keys.
No, that won't work. I apologize.
Just go out of the present mode maybe, and we'll watch it in your browser.
Yeah. All right, can everyone see that?
Yep.
So the second thing, work with your private bank on applying for the Paycheck Protection Program. There's a second element to the CARES Act called the Paycheck Protection Program that is substantially larger than the disaster loan. And again, we'll talk more about each of these. The foundation of the Paycheck Protection Program is essentially a grant that is eligible, a forgivable loan that functions like a grant that can help any loan recipient pay for costs such as paying yourself, the equivalent of your payroll, rent, utilities, and costs associated with running your company or your business, even if you are a sole proprietor. Notably, the Paycheck Protection Program became available for independent contractors and sole proprietors last Friday. And so this is a very fresh discussion for any artists who are not a company but do take revenue and run as essentially a sole proprietor in their art practice. So we could talk more about each of these. There's a search function that we have here to determine which banks in our community are participating in the Paycheck Protection Program. again, if you email Maureen or work with us, we can help you find someone to help you apply for this program, at least through the search function, if not, hopefully through a banking introduction. But we want to be clear. First step, everyone should go and apply for the SBA Disaster Loan. Second step, we encourage each of you to look to potentially participate in the Paycheck Protection Program, and we can help you find a bank if necessary. The third is, in addition to researching all of them, apply for both of them. Even if you ultimately don't want the loan or to take on debt, it's optionality. It's something that you can choose to do or not do later. If you decide not to apply, you'll never know what you could have gotten. And so it's just good to find out what your options are and what you're best suited to participate in for purposes of the crisis. And then finally, the state of Wisconsin is hopefully going to begin participating this week in a program called the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. And this is an expanded unemployment program through the federal government as a part of the CARES Act that for the first time does two things. One, it increases traditional unemployment compensation an additional $600 a week. So on top of whatever you would have otherwise been eligible for under unemployment compensation, they're adding the equivalent of $2,400 a month of additional unemployment support for a period of time during the crisis. Second, and this is really critical for artists, for the first time, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program makes it possible for sole proprietors such as artists and freelancers and independent contractors to apply for unemployment assistance. This program is not yet available, and we have this in the deck, in Wisconsin, but we do anticipate it becoming available this week. And the equivalent of what it means is potentially up, comparable to a $24,000 a year salary, or more than that, just in the additional unemployment compensation, much less the base level. So I think this is going to be a particularly relevant program for artists. It's not yet available, and we want to make sure everyone's aware of the opportunity for the first time, I think, in the history of the unemployment law, for artists to apply as artists. So we'll talk more about each of these, but this is, if you're looking for a summary of what we're doing on this call and what we're trying to do in our messaging to each artist, it's, apply for this disaster loan, work on applying for the Paycheck Protection Program. Even if you don't want them, figure out your options. And then finally, examine whether or not this new Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program would be a good fit for you. Again, I know this is a lot. This is really dense. We anticipate there's a lot of questions. Feel free to work with us individually. This is not meant for you to understand it on one slide. It is meant to set the stage for how it is that we can hopefully work with you individually over the next week and through the rest of the webinar content. Turning to the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economy Security Act, this is what people are calling the CARES Act. The two big takeaways from this are that the CARES Act includes a new program created through the federal legislation called the Paycheck Protection Program. And this program is notable for what it offers in the forgivable loan context. If you, in the course of 8 weeks, use this loan for rent, mortgage expense, debt obligations, and payroll, and they have restrictions on who qualifies for what. So you got to read more into this. That portion of the loan becomes essentially a grant. It's forgiven, and so it's a really important program that is available to sole proprietors and independent contractors. Obviously, there are a ton of questions about what happens if you're not receiving payroll and taking things like a draw. And we anticipate there's going to be more guidance on that in the coming days, but there is going to be a way. So as much as we might not be able to answer the specifics of your question yet, it's clear that you will have an answer to it, and it's worth, no matter how you're taking payroll for yourself, examining whether you're eligible for this program. The way they calculate how much of a loan you can get, and therefore, in a sense, how much of a forgivable loan or grant you can get, is they take your average monthly payroll times 2.5, and that's the extent of the loan you're eligible for. So if you're an artist and you're taking home, you can show and document according to the law's requirements that you've been taking home $2,500 a month, you would be eligible for $2,500 a month times 2.5. So I think it's $6,250. You'd be eligible for that much of a loan under the program. And as long as you use that loan for paying yourself and eligible expenses over the next 8 weeks, you will be able to turn the entirety of that of that loan into a grant. That's the first program. Again, we'll talk more about this. This is incredibly complex. That's a very loaded sentence, but it is an accurate one. The second is that the CARES Act created an SBA Disaster Loan, which is a new loan, which includes the CARES Act created a new loan advance program known as the emergency grant of up to $10,000 that under the law required the SBA to process everyone who applied within 3 days of their application. Notably, the emergency grant does not need to be repaid. And even if you're ultimately declined for the loan, you get to keep the emergency grant. When we wrote this a week and a half ago, we anticipated all the loans would be processed in 3 days. It's a week and a half later. We've talked to hundreds of small businesses. None of them has heard a thing about their application for this loan or their grant. So the program is still very available, and you're still encouraged to apply. We're not sure what the next step is, but we still encourage everyone to take a look at it. And again, this could be a significant emergency grant for every artist. So it's worth applying to. There's a lot of questions about how the first one I mentioned, the Paycheck Protection Program, works with the second one I'm mentioning, the SBA Disaster Loan. The big takeaway is that they do work together. And if you're applying and participating in both, we can work with you on how best to coordinate that. But we're encouraging everyone to apply for both, and if eligible, to consider participating in both of the loan programs. What we're most worried about is that the time to get to this cash could be weeks, if not longer. The Paycheck Protection Program appears to be moving the fastest. So commercial banks are administering the Paycheck Protection Program. They're being responsive, which is frankly more than we've gotten from the SBA itself. And we anticipate if you apply for both, the first one that you're likely to receive support under is the Paycheck Protection Program. We also believe that that program will be a larger check to individual artists. Admittedly, it's more complicated, but potentially has far more upside. So we'll share more on each of these, but and we'll have a deck just about these. But these are two very relevant, immediately available programs for artists to apply for this week, each of which will likely provide $1,000 or more in grant opportunities per applicant. So if you look at these programs and you apply, it's likely you're getting a minimum of 1,000 to potentially tens of thousands of additional resources in the next 90 days. And we could not be more clear. This is available for sole proprietors. If you're an artist, even if you don't consider yourself a business, if you've been running, taking revenue and monetizing your career in one way or another, you're likely eligible to apply for this program. And there's a lot of questions around that, but we want the big message to be clear. In terms of the size of these packages, they're both very large and they're being spent very quickly. The CARES Act was a total of $2 trillion in relief, and that included about $350 billion in support for small businesses. And in this case, we're including artists, even as sole proprietors, in that number. The Paycheck Protection Program is technically a new loan under an existing program, which is a lot of legal way of saying they didn't have to create entirely new legislation, but they could create a new program. The new loan is capped at the lesser of $10 million, or 2.5 times your average monthly payroll. If you're paying yourself in excess of $100,000 a year, you can only include up to $100,000 of that for purposes of the loan's calculation. Notably, you can include anything like health benefits, retirement costs. You can't include your Social Security taxes, but you can include a lot of other state and federal taxes in determining the eligibility amount per applicant. The loan itself must be used for things like your payroll, your rent, your commercial mortgage, and utilities. Obviously, if you're an artist operating out of your home, this raises unique and specific questions, and we'll try to get you answers. The federal government has been slow to answer many of these questions itself, so some of them are still speculative. But we're doing our best, and every day the federal government is issuing what's called guidance to help us understand this. And we anticipate much of the emerging guidance will be in answering questions like, what happens if your home is where you operate from? Is the mortgage payment on your home eligible for this program? As of right now, I don't know that I would feel comfortable answering that, but I hope that we will in the coming days. And your banker will certainly work with you in the course of filling out your application to get that right. If you receive the loan, you must commit to spending these loans on 8 weeks of payroll, rent, utilities in order to qualify for the forgiveness provision. if any loan amount is not forgiven, it's basically a 1% loan over 2 years with no interest. So it's the best loan you'll ever take out in your life, worst case. Best case, it's a total grant program. Notably, at least if you get the loan, 75% of the loan itself must be spent on payroll. So if you're a single artist, you have to spend 75% of whatever you get paying yourself. Hopefully that's manageable. And I know it's sort of a weird thought, but if you get an $8,000 loan, you have to spend $6,000 in paying yourself in order to qualify for the loan forgiveness. Obviously, using that upfront to pay for things like mortgage and rent versus spending it on payroll is if you're under one budget, sort of a weird game to play. But it's important that you document that you paid yourself 75% of it in order to trigger the forgiveness provisions. Even if you then spend whatever you took on some of those costs, they're not going to track what you spend your money on, but they are going to track that you paid yourself and didn't use more of it up front for rent and utilities. So it's sort of weird, but there are going to be important documentations on this. We encourage you to create your own bank account for receiving any of these loans and use that bank account to track making sure that you do comply with the requirement that $6,000 of that bank account's costs must be spent directly to you. So basically you're going to create an account to write a check to yourself. And then you can document on top of that 75% any other costs that you spent it on. Again, the loan is an interest rate of 1%. It requires no personal guarantees. It requires no collateral. So this is, I think, the best loan application any of you may ever fill out. And we can't encourage you enough to consider it. Whatever you've been using to live on from your art practice is probably what you can use to qualify for the loan. And you'll be able to basically maintain what you're doing over the 8 weeks in order to qualify for the forgiveness. Additionally, the SBA Disaster Loan, this separate loan, is an amount of up to $2 million. You can also request this advance of $10,000. It's supposed to go out in 3 days. Basically, when you apply for the loan, you're also applying for the $10,000. It's one and the same at this point. And unfortunately, they're not able to meet the 3-day requirement, but it's certainly something for you to consider. So this is a lot. Just recapping this, if you're a sole proprietor, a freelancer, a gig worker, an artist, a creative, consider applying for the SBA Disaster Loan. This makes you eligible notably for the advanced grant, the emergency grant. Second, apply with your bank for this Paycheck Protection Program. It is now available to you for the first time this week. And then finally, look into the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. It's not yet available in Wisconsin, but it will be. And it's a substantial new program that is available for the first time to artists. So you've got 3 windows of relief that as soon as you can access this, you can start getting dollars flowing into your account. It's not tens of dollars. It's not hundreds of dollars. It's thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars of support per applicant over the next 90 days. So this is probably the best artist stimulus program in the history of the country. Please make sure that you're being aggressive and taking advantage of it. If you're a nonprofit, I know some of them have signed up, or if you are functioning as a small business, I know some applicants, participants in this program are in that bucket. Please make sure you apply for this protection program. Please make sure you apply for the pandemic assistance. Also make sure for the disaster loan. Also, you should look into this pandemic assistance for yourself or for your employees if they're eligible for it. So we want to stress, no matter which angle you're looking at, whether you're an employer or an employee or both, you should be looking at all 3 of these programs. For this Paycheck Protection Program, it's up to $10 million per loan. That's essentially for companies of 500. I anticipate for everyone on this call, it's going to be for purposes of the loan, it's going to be this 2.5 times multiple of your average monthly payroll. You're permitted to use it for payroll, for rent and commercial mortgage interest, for utilities. Obviously, the line between whether your home is your place of business is one that we need to clarify, but it's something that it's worth clarifying and potentially possible depending on the context. The applicable time frame for the loan is February 15th through June 20th. Borrowers eligible for this must, for the purposes of this 8-week period following the loan, spend at least 75% of it on payroll to qualify for the forgivable loan portion. If you have laid people off, or if hours are reduced and you don't maintain payroll at that average rate, you have the possibility of having the loan forgiveness reduced. So if you have specific questions on that, follow up with us. I don't think it's as relevant for this group, But if you have, if you had a company of 4 employees and all of them have been laid off, it's possible if you don't bring them back within the rules requirements, you may not be eligible for the loan forgiveness portion. So I don't, if you've got more than 1 employee, I don't want you to, if you've got less than, if you're a sole proprietor, I don't want you to worry about this. But if you've got more than 1 employee, I think you should tag that and follow up with us for additional clarification. We have the application form. If you want to see it, you have to apply through your private bank. But for anyone who's curious to take a look at what the bank will be reviewing as required by the SBA, you're welcome to do so. Note that your bank may require more information. So whatever's asked here is not they're able to ask more than these sets of questions, but these are the sets of questions they have to ask in order to apply. Again, the big things about this, it doesn't require any personal guarantee. It doesn't require any collateral, which is a crazy good way of applying. You don't have to put your house up in order to go on this program. It's as good as it gets. You don't have to certify that you can't get credit elsewhere. There's no prepayment penalty. It's worth looking at this Paycheck Protection Program. You do have a couple requirements. You have to certify that this loan is necessary for you because of the current crisis. And you can't use funds from the SBA program for the same uses. So if you get both the disaster loan and the Paycheck Protection Forgiveness Loan, you're going to have to certify that you didn't use the emergency grant from the disaster loan program for payroll during that 8-week period, or for any of the costs that you're also seeking forgiveness for. Basically, you have to find another way to spend that money, is the message of that provision. Again, the loan provision is really good. It's 2 years with 1% interest. You have to just be basically a business with 500 or fewer employees. There are rules around affiliation that aren't as important for this discussion. And by contrast, that's the first program is the Paycheck Protection. The second program is this disaster loan program. It's a low interest loan. It's got emergency grants that are available. It includes sole proprietors and independent contractors. For a small business or a sole proprietor, the interest rate on this loan is 3.75%. It's typically a 15-year term, but it can go to 30 years. For nonprofits, it's a 2.75% interest rate. So you can apply through the SBA through that program, and we encourage everyone to look at it because of that possible emergency grant that's available. The benefits of this disaster loan program, it's basically based solely on applicants' credit score. They're being really generous with which kind of credit scores are available. So if you've got bad credit, if you've got really bad credit, you should still apply. You're eligible to request up to this $10,000 in the emergency grant, even if you're later rejected for the grant for the loan itself. The SBA may require you to get some insurance. We doubt that that'll happen, but it's worth disclosing if they send you a request. Again, I don't think that'll happen once, but it is technically possible. And then finally, this pandemic unemployment assistance overview. This is something we hope artists are really looking at. Again, the legislature and the state have to make this program available, but we think it'll happen this week. And when it does happen, we believe that there will be a potential rush for artists to take advantage of it. Notably, the federal government has extended unemployment compensation for independent contractors and self-employed, for example, freelancers and gig workers, previously not eligible for this unemployment. So it's that rule in and of itself is a sea change in unemployment law that affects artists as much as it affects anyone. This is probably the most important employment law for artists in 100 years. Second, there's an additional benefit of $600 a week of unemployment compensation during this COVID window crisis. So if you apply for unemployment, typically they'll do about half of your income for unemployment. They're going to add an additional $600 a week. So this is a major program. In the course of 90 days per artist, this could be a $10,000 plus benefit. So we really strongly encourage artists to take a look at this. Notably, if you're getting the Paycheck Protection Program loan forgiveness, you can't use both the loan forgiveness of the Paycheck Protection Program to pay yourself and claim unemployment. So you're going to have to manage which one of those two you're using. But we think artists should take a good, strong look at this. We have the least amount of slides to offer on this because the program is being created in real time. So in the last 3 or 4 days, the federal government has tried to explain to the states how it is that they're supposed to administer this, including questions like how should artists determine what their payroll has been in order to determine or what amount of unemployment compensation they're eligible for. But at a minimum, you will be eligible for the $600 a week. So you'll go no lower than $600 per week. But based on how they interpret the additional rules, you could go $700, $800, $900 a week of unemployment compensation, depending on how the state implements this rule. So the rule changes are really, if you view the $600 a week as a minimum, the rule changes will only clarify how much more than that you can get per week under the new program. And again, prior to this, in many cases, artists could not apply, period, much less apply for the equivalent of tens of thousands a year of unemployment at a base level. Wisconsin's likely rolling this program out this week, and you can click the link that we have there in order to learn more. Anticipate that website will be updated. So if you haven't already applied, or if you haven't already gone to it, or if you've gone to it and it didn't have information, check it frequently because we think it could change by the hour. The COVID scenarios for how you're covered under this pandemic unemployment assistance, this is drawn from the state of Wisconsin website. I'll point out 6 from the bottom, self-employed, independent contractors. That would be one that we believe would qualify almost certainly every artist on this if they're self-employed or a sole proprietor. So this law is pretty clear that it applies to artists. And it's such a sea change that we're worried because everyone presumed they weren't eligible, much less eligible for this very large additional weekly benefit, that people just don't have it on our radar. And we're closing with this because we hope, if you take nothing else out of this program, that you strongly consider whether or not the pandemic unemployment assistance program could be the right program for you, in addition to potentially participating in these other programs as well. So I anticipate we may have additional questions. We have all the sources we use to compile this deck, and we'll try to spend more of the time filling out the questions and answers. But I want to close the formal presentation itself by encouraging everyone who has not already signed up for office hours to strongly consider doing so and doing a one-on-one call with our team to please attend the rest of the webinars this week. Between these programs and the emergency relief programs through efforts such as Imagine MKE, I think every artist should feel like they can navigate the next 90 to 120 days to at least get some support. Don't walk around with $10 in your bank account. Do what you can in order to make sure that you can pay your bills and take the most advantage of the current crisis. So I'll close. I know we have 6 questions, so I'll see if we can try to answer as many as we can. The links, somebody asked if we'll be sending the links. They will be sent. So this deck will be available. We can send the deck for anyone to check out at the completion of the webinar, and you can go through and click the links then. Another panelist said that they applied for the SBA loan over a week ago and have not heard back. Any insight on a timeline for response? The short answer is that the SBA has not communicated to any of the small businesses we've talked to. So we've been doing emergency response office hours and one-on-ones across the country, and many people have requested the one-on-one just to say they haven't heard back, so they presume that means they didn't apply. In truth, they had all applied, and the SBA just has not gotten back to them. Again, the SBA was required under the law to get back to everyone who applied within 3 days, or at least to process the applications within 3 days. It's clear that has not happened, and we're all just waiting indefinitely for them to hear back. But we will hear back. So while it has been delayed, we know that will happen. So I think those exhausted most of the questions people had. If anybody has any additional ones, we can grab them. Otherwise, I think the big.
We got one more.
Sorry.
What if you work part-time to support your art practice, but your art practice, although significant, usually breaks even? It seems like these depend on your art income. So I guess it would really hinge on the underlying person. So if you still have another source of income that you're eligible for, in theory, you would not be able to qualify for unemployment. However, going to the slides that Joe presented, there is a broadened definition of unemployment, and that includes people who choose to quit their job because of COVID-19, and that would therefore make you eligible for the $600 a week in federal unemployment funding, as well as the state contribution to unemployment. So that would be a personal finance decision for you all to make. But if you still have other sources of income, meaning you have another job, whether it be full-time or part-time, in addition to your art practice, you would not qualify for unemployment unless you quit or lost that job or that business has been shut down. Then next question would be, well, if your art practice breaks even, what would be the underlying basis for the Paycheck Protection Program? My guess is it breaks even if you take into account some other overhead charges. So like if you're paying for studio space or supplies or technology related to your art practice, my guess is that you're deducting those amounts. In that case, you could simply look at the income generated before expenses. So what are the actual gross receipts coming into your business? And I would try to work with your bank to use that as the underlying basis for the Paycheck Protection Program so that you would have some basis. Again, we're still waiting on more clear guidance on how they're going to treat these sole proprietors, if you will, which would include most artists in terms of how they're going to use a basis for the PPP loan. But my best advice right now would be try to work with your bank to get them to look at just your gross receipts that are coming in to your art practice and have that be the basis for calculating average monthly payroll.
How good is it to determine the quantity of, how is good to determine the quantity of payroll to myself if I'm a sole proprietor of my company and the income varies from month to month? And this could be a question for both the Paycheck Protection Program and for the emerging pandemic unemployment assistance program. For the Paycheck Protection Program, it's a good question to work through with your banker, but they'll likely take an average of what you can demonstrate you've been taking as income. And so you want to be able to document the draws, the checks to yourself that you've used or the draws from the bank account, whatever information you can supply to establish even healthcare costs. I think, whatever you can use to demonstrate that number of essentially the bigger the loan you're eligible for. For purposes of the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Act, that will be determined most likely from the guidance that is yet to be emerged, that is yet to be written from the federal government to the states. We think, we're speculating, it will be similar to what I just described. So whatever you can demonstrate as the income that you've been using will likely be what they will be using to determine the unemployment compensation. But admittedly, we are speculating, and that tells you a lot of what's causing some of these delays in the programs to be implemented. But suffice it to say that you are under the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program eligible at a minimum for the $600 weekly check. It's just how much more you may be eligible under both your ability to demonstrate your past income as well as the state's interpretation of what's eligible. The question about what if you are underemployed, still doing some work but significantly less, I'm assuming that's also a question for the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Act. I think I would recommend checking the state website. They have a frequently asked questions page that includes, it's very contextual, your question, how it might apply to the law. I think you should check that out. If you still have questions, you should follow up on office hours. We're going to do our best to have an unemployment webinar specifically, where you'll be able to speak with an expert in this. Again, because the program's not yet up, it leaves a lot of our ability to answer a specific question like that open. But as Troy said, there are eligibility questions both on why you're underemployed, how you're underemployed, and if essentially you need to take steps in order to be eligible for the law, consistent with the law's requirements and your eligibility. But point being, these are all very good questions, and you should very much be considering, even if you are underemployed, whether you still may qualify, depending on facts yet unknown. I'm trying to see if I missed any additional questions. And then as noted in the question and answer in the chat, we will be posting this so you can check it out, as well as we have all of our additional webinars. There are additional webinars to come. And again, we're trying to give you a heads up about a program that's not yet even available. So if you anticipate that you can't find answers to your questions, or that you're still wondering if you need more, this program isn't even available, so the clock hasn't begun to run yet, and hopefully you can use this time to work with us to help you answer as much as possible. And again, we'll be trying to provide additional information as it becomes available. Are there going to be platforms that artists can use to share their work in these times? I'll have Maureen and Claire answer that, but there definitely are opportunities for artists to do that, and I think the program will do our best to try to explain that as well. Maureen, if you have any.
Yes, so we will definitely be discussing that in upcoming webinars. I think that is Wednesday or Thursday's webinar, actually. So yes, we are looking into ways that you can continue your artist practice through these difficult times. I think a lot of platforms are switching to digital exhibitions right now, etc. But yes, we will be discussing that further later this week. And if that's it for questions, thank you all so much for listening in on this webinar, and thank you, Joe and Troy, for giving us a rundown. I also have lots of questions, so I think I really want to encourage all of you to sign up for our one-on-one office hours, where we can really help tailor this information to your specific situation. So thank you again.
Yes, I'll just chime in to say, artists, if there's anybody else in your network, any friends, collaborators that you think could benefit from this accelerator, these webinars, or meeting with Maureen, myself, and the rest of the team, please, please, please share this, amplify this. We want to make sure as many people as possible get access to this info.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.